Just wake up. You guys are sleeping. The young people say you're sleeping on yourself. You guys are sleeping. You're sleeping, you're entitled, you're lazy, you have a quick return syndrome, you have too many expectations too quickly. Just wake up. Guys, wake up. It took 30 years to build Apple. It took 40 years to build Dell. It took, 40 years to build Microsoft. And this is in the world's largest economy. You're in the bottom of the darkest economy on earth. How long do you think it's going to take you? Wake up. And it's not just about the effort, but wake up on everything. Wake up to the opportunities that are alive. Wake up to the political systems that govern us. Just wake up. Be awake. Watch what's happening around you. Read, love, live, learn. Be in spaces. Be involved. Just get in. Get in. Take this plug of yours in life and plug it into the cord of the system so that we can all be in it together. But just wake up. Too many of us are sleeping. We're doing the same things we've always done. You're doing the same things everybody else has done. And then you're waiting for the world to come and meet you halfway. And it doesn't work that way. Just wake up.
Need motivation?
Watch your top 10.
Where's the Believe Nation?
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more. And you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Vusi Thembekwayo, and my take on his top 10 rules to success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, get a job.
First thing I say to everybody who wants to start their own business is get a job. It sounds the most counterintuitive advice. I'll tell you why. I learned the most about how to run a business when I was employed. Because when you're employed, you work for someone, you use their money to make mistakes, you learn everything about how a well-functioning company works. So you learn about IT, HR, management information systems, corporate finance, management accounting, sales, marketing, operations, admin, all of it. Working. Month end, you're being paid and you're learning. You start your own business, never having worked. What happens is you have to learn all of these things off your own back in a very tough world. So I think I've done well because when I was in corporate, I learned. I benefited from Black economic empowerment. I was an employment equity person who was moved around to different departments, got to see how things work. And then when I was in management, I was in general management, so I got a broad sense of the organization and I could think broadly. I could also be very specific when I needed to and deeply technocratic, but also broad and strategic where you needed to, right? And so today, as one builds businesses, I know how to do it because I did it working for someone. So best piece of advice I can give, especially to a young person who has never worked before, is get a job.
Rule number 3, have grit and hunger.
I think life is a lot about who you are and how you show up when the losses happen. Anybody can be a superstar when it's winning season. Yeah. And it's easy to believe in yourself when you're on a winning streak. Yeah. But when you get tested, when you lose, when things go wrong, when you're and if there's one thing I've learned actually is this. It's a great way to start our conversation. It is that talent is overrated. That speed is the most important commodity you have. That time must never, ever be wasted. And most importantly, that somebody with grit and hunger will always outperform people around them. If you have the ability to hang on when things get tough and you're hungry for what you want, you'll succeed. You will succeed. It's a law written into the universe. It's like gravity. You jump off a 20-story building, gravity is going to pull you down. If you have grit and hunger, it doesn't matter how you look, where you come from, how you speak, what they say about you, how long it takes. If you have grit and you have hunger, you will definitely succeed.
Rule number 4, find your assignment.
My Creator put me on this earth for a specific assignment. So I've got a job to do. Now, people often misunderstand assignment for destination. Those are not the same things. Assignment is the job to do. Destination is the place to go. And in going to the place, I have the job to do.
Right.
Your question was around how does he link that to his purpose? It's a tough question to answer because many people often don't think about their assignment on earth.
Yeah.
What are you here for? So we think often about, just think about it. We go to school. At school, we're taught to get a skill. You get a skill. With that skill, you're taught to make an income. You make an income. With that income, you're taught to spend it. Where is assignment there? Where's purpose? Where does it connect?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
This is, by the way, why I have a great respect and reverence for people in the creative arts, because people in the creative arts literally every single day choose their assignment.
Absolutely.
And often they choose their assignment, applying their skill in a sector that will never pay them what they're truly worth. Like, I don't think we've paid Brenda Fassie what she was truly worth.
True.
We didn't pay Mahlatini what he was truly worth. Do you understand? Like, these people influenced a time, a generation. They left us all richer. We have memories that, you know, as children were created to the songs of Ulaki Dube. And I'm not sure we paid him what he was truly worth. So the question for people who ask the question around, what is my purpose, is do you understand your assignment? Like, why are you here?
Yes.
And that's not a question Vusi can answer for you. That's a question you can answer for yourself in a conversation with your creator. Why are you here? Absent of you on earth, what would be missing? What's your contribution? And when you move on, what is the thing you will leave behind that will live the world and leave the world a much better place than you found it? It's a deep, deep question.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, be disciplined, not motivated.
All of us here at the beginning of a new year write these things called New Year's resolutions. And then New Year's resolutions, number 1, make more money. Yeah? Number 2, change my boyfriend. Number 3, get into shape. Yeah? Number 3, get into shape is somewhere in the top 3. So what do? You go to the gym, you get a gym membership. Yeah? You go to the local Nike store and you buy like all of your gym gear. You are motivated. You are inspired. You are going to the damn gym. You go to YouTube, you subscribe to all of the fitness channels. You go to your Instagram, you follow all of the fitness models. You are motivated. You are going to the damn gym. You're going to get in shape. That's what you're going to do. The people you're following on YouTube have been working on for a minimum of 5 years to look like that. So you have the incorrect understanding that after a month of working out, you're going to look like them. So what happens in the first month? You're excited. You go to gym every single month. You know, and you take the pains and your body is sore, but you know, I'm excited. I'm going to gym. Then life happens. Company doesn't make money, you don't make your targets, you fall a bit ill, something happens, and all of a sudden you stop going to gym for a day becomes 2, 2 becomes a week. Now all of a sudden you've had a gym membership for 3 months and you haven't been in that time. What did you miss? You thought motivation was the formula. Winners don't need motivation, winners need discipline. Discipline's about getting it done because it needs to get done, not because I feel like it, not because I'm motivated for it. You think Nelson Mandela was motivated to spend 27 years in prison? You think Martin Luther King was motivated to march across the states and proclaim freedom? You think, you know, if you look at people that change the world, they're not doing it because they're motivated. They're doing it because they made a commitment to do it and they disciplined to see it through. Discipline is far more important than motivation, which is why you've got to be careful the decisions you make, because once you make the decision, you have to see that decision through. Like my mentor says, first we make the decisions, then the decisions make us. So you've got to be very careful the decisions you make. Be very careful the commitments you make. Motivation, I'm telling you now, is completely overrated. It's important, don't get me wrong. You know, we meet according to motivation, we feel good, rah-rah, but that'll fade. You need a stronger will and a deeper commitment to see things through.
Rule number 6, see the big picture.
One of the things I have learned to do, and I'm not yet perfect at it, but I'm learning, is I'm learning to see time in context. Because what happens with us is when you are in the moment is so intense that your whole entire life can be consumed in it. But time is a continuum, right? So you learn to see moment as a part of the continuum, not as everything. So when I go through challenges, I just remember it's part of the continuum. It started, so it must end, and then something must carry on. There must be life after this, as there was before it. Not easy, I have to tell you. Not easy. Very difficult. I have been close to losing it all more times than you can imagine.
Rule number 7, fail forward.
So the other day I bumped into a young lady and she asked me a question about a blog article I'd recently written. So I recently wrote a blog article and I was talking about failing in business, in fact, failing in life generally, but failing in business and this concept of failing forward. And she just didn't get it. She was like, what do you mean by this failing forward thing? You're either failing or you're succeeding, right? And the answer is no, you're not either failing or succeeding. You know, the whole thing about failing forward is about what you take out of the failure. So let me put it to you this way. People think failing is something that only happens at the beginning of your business journey. The truth is, failing is something that happens in life, all throughout life. And it's something that's going to happen in your business journey all throughout your business journey. You're not always going to get things right, and things are not always going to go your way. So very recently, certainly since I've made the decision to start my growth fund and start financing entrepreneurs, start working in the space as a venture capital, and I don't come into the VC space as do many other people. You know, I'm raised by a single mother, I'm Worksheet, started my own business myself. So I don't come from a legacy of money. So for me, losing money is a very personal thing. It's like money I've worked for. It's not just money that fell off a tree. And I started investing in entrepreneurs. And some you win, some make money, and some you lose. Some you actually lose your investment. In my books, that's failing. If I take money and I give it to an entrepreneur and I invest in them, and they don't succeed, and in turn I lose my money, that's failing, right? So the question then becomes, even in my own situation, how does this failing forward principle apply? And here's what I think you need to realize as an entrepreneur. Knowledge is not a finite commodity. Knowledge is a fluid construct. So it's something you're always in the process of acquiring. You'll never have all the knowledge there is. Even today, I don't know everything there is to know about my business, about my industry. I try to. I stay ahead of the curve. I know more than most, but I don't know everything. It's just not possible. So when you understand that knowledge is a fluid construct and not a finite commodity, then you realize that the purpose for failure in your life is to accelerate your knowledge process. Certainly the knowledge acquisition process. The reason you fail is because there's something you must learn so that you don't fail at the same thing again. That's what failing forward means. So if you're watching this video and you're an entrepreneur and you're close to closing down, you don't have money to pay your suppliers, you don't have money to pay your staff, the question you need to ask yourself is this: what lesson am I learning at this time? And what am I going to do in future to make sure I am never here again? That's how you fail forward.
Rule number 8, be 1% better than others.
If you follow any pursuit or endeavor, any form of conquest, sports, business, arts, culture, anything where human beings endeavor to perform better than other human beings, there's something called the law of averages, which is that there are people who are below the average, but the average person fits into this big bowl in the middle called average. Then you get this tiny little group of people at the top. My fascination has always been with the people at the top. Think about the world's fastest man of all time, Usain Bolt. So is Usain Bolt the world's fastest man because he's more talented than anybody else? Or is he the world's fastest man because he has a genetic advantage?
Or is he the world's fastest man because he has the best training? Is he the world's fastest man because he has access to the most advanced science? Or is he the world's fastest man because of all of those and he's only 1% better than everybody else? I learned that I didn't have to be 100% better than everybody else. I didn't even have to be 10% better than everybody else. I only had to be 1% better than everybody else at everything. Go watch Sean Roden when he won Mr. Olympia. I'll never forget, there's that shot of Sean Roden coming out and there's the light from the back and you see Sean Roden's waist this big and his shoulders that big and that beautiful arch up, right? Now, you're probably watching this going, why the hell is Vusi talking about bodybuilding? Let me tell you why I love things like bodybuilders and athletes. It's because they have to train tens of thousands of hours to make that 1% improvement. That additional 1% is tens of thousands of hours more than the 99% of the people beneath you. So if you're busy studying for an exam, if you want to be right at the top of your pile, you got to make sure that you put in more hours. If you're training, you got to do that too. You're running a business, you got to be up earlier, sleep later, work harder when you're in it.
Rule number 9, learn to know.
Tell me about that relearning process. It seems to me like that specific thing is something that really discourages people. They don't know what to do when they hit that relearning kind of fork in the road. What do you do when you get there?
Well, I mean, I think a part of the problem is sort of the mental perspective and disposition we've taken to the learning question. So what we've done in South Africa is we've gone, and it's not a South African thing. I mean, I think it's a global challenge. Is you learn to pass, and you'll hear often, even in business schools, you're finding it today, where learners will ask the lecturer about, is this in the exam? And that speaks to sort of the disposition we've taken to the education and the learning, which is I learn to pass, and I want to know what's in the exam so I can learn that, so I can answer that question, so I can move on. Learning in the new world is about learning to know so that you don't need to know what you know. And this is where it becomes really complex. When you know what you know, it means you haven't learned it yet because it means it's still conscious in your mind. But it's when you start using it, not knowing that you've learned it, that it becomes internalized in you. That's really when you've learned. And that's why this relearning thing has become so important. The world we live in is changing really fast. I mean, in 1960, the amount of computing power Neil Armstrong had to send him to the moon was less than the amount of computing power you have in your cell phone right now. Right? And he yet created one of the greatest feats of the 20th century. So the world has changed, and if it has, so too do how we need to approach the learning process and understand that there's actually no such thing as a complete. There's no pass anymore. The pass is every day. It's a perpetual pursuit, and you're always looking to get better.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is move on.
Sometimes it's also learning when to say enough. And learning when to close the door, learning when to move on, learning when to realize that the old playbook doesn't work anymore. The thing about us human beings is we're very strange, right? Is you come up with a playbook, and when that playbook succeeds, you play the playbook over and over and over again. But you forget that the playbook succeeds in a particular environment. If the environment changes, the playbook's not going to work anymore. I don't know how many people in this conversation have seen that, where you have a coach of a particular sports team who does exceptionally well one season. And then the next season, same coach, same sports team, and things fall apart. It's because the environment has shifted. It's changed. Spain had that problem. They were the best team in the world at some point. Correct. And then what happened with Spain is they continued to play their style of football, this tiki-taka style of football, as they call it. But the world adapted, it shifted, it changed, and it molded itself around that playbook. Yeah. So I think a lot of us come from, this is my playbook. I know this country, this market, this product, this territory. I know those people and those customers. Yeah. But the world has changed. It's 2021. It's not 1998. And the minute you understand that, you then understand that the concept of being nomadic is not only about being in a part of the world where you are open to the whole world, it's also about moving on when things don't work anymore. If you study people who are at the pinnacle of anything, you recognize that to get there, motivation was maybe 1% of the formula, maybe. 1%. And I'll prove it to you. If you want to become a world-class bodybuilder, say an IFBB pro, what that takes is you have to train twice a day, 6 days a week. You have to have 8 meals a day. Your calorie intake is regimented. Your meals are pre-planned and pre-cooked. You don't eat according to taste, you eat according to function. So my trainer, for instance, will eat and I'm going, what are you eating? And he's having he'll have chicken that was boiled without salt. And he'll have like half a kilo of it. I mean, what are you doing? He says, I'm taking in protein. He doesn't say I'm eating. He says, I'm taking in protein. For him, it's functional. It's not taste-based. Then you would probably have to train for a minimum, and this is if you are a genetic phenom, you'd have to train for a minimum of 10 years before you could get on a stage and compete at an average level with an average global bodybuilder. Average. Okay. So why am I telling you this? All of us here at the beginning of a new year write these things called New Year's resolutions. And then New Year's resolutions, number 1, make more money. Yeah? Number 2, change my boyfriend. Number 3, get into shape. Yeah? Number 3, get into shape is somewhere in the top 3. So what do? You go to the gym, you get a gym membership. Yeah? You go to the local Nike store and you buy like all of your gym gear. You are motivated. You are inspired. You are going to the damn gym. You go to YouTube, you subscribe to all of the fitness channels. You go to your Instagram, you follow all of the fitness models. You are motivated. You are going to the damn gym. You're going to get in shape. That's what you're going to do. The people you're following on YouTube have been working out for a minimum of 5 years to look like that. So you have the incorrect understanding that after a month of working out, you're going to look like them. So what happens in the first month? You're excited. You go to gym every single month. And you take the pains and your body is sore, but I'm excited. I'm going to gym. Then life happens. Company doesn't make money. You don't make your targets. You fall a bit ill. Something happens. And all of a sudden you stop going to gym for a day. A day becomes 2, 2 becomes a week. Now all of a sudden you've had a gym membership for 3 months and you haven't been in that time. What did you miss? You thought motivation was the formula. Winners don't need motivation. Winners need discipline. Discipline's about getting it done because it needs to get done, not because I feel like it, not because I'm motivated for it. You think Nelson Mandela was motivated to spend 27 years in prison? You think Martin Luther King was motivated to march across the states and proclaim freedom? You think, if you look at people that change the world, they're not doing it because they're motivated. They're doing it because they made a commitment to do it and they disciplined to see it through. Discipline is far more important than motivation, which is why you've got to be careful the decisions you make. Because once you make the decision, you have to see that decision through. Like my mentor says, first we make the decisions, then the decisions make us. So you've got to be very careful the decisions you make. Be very careful the commitments you make. Motivation, I'm telling you now, is completely overrated. It's important, don't get me wrong. We meet according to motivation, we feel good, rah-rah, but that'll fade. You need a stronger will and a deeper commitment to see things through.
The single most important part of the momentum equation is movement, right? So I'll give you an example. Here's how I explain this to people. So if you're driving your car and for some other strange reason, the car stalls and you're stuck, right? You have one of two things you can do, right? And let's imagine you're in a, cell phone black zone. You can't phone anybody. You get one or two things you can do. Sit in the car, switch on your hazards, and pray somebody's going to come past you. That's what we call the charity approach. Hi, I'm here. I grew up poor. I didn't get a good education. Help. It completely gives the power to the person on the other side of the equation, which is I feel like I want to help, and here's how much I'm willing to help with, right? Flash the hazards. The alternative is you open the driver's door, you drop the handbrake, you put your shoulder behind the chassis, and you push. Now, when you start pushing, the hardest part is going to be that initial meter because the car is completely still. It's got no momentum. So you start pushing. And what happens is 5 meters down the line, 10 meters down the line, assuming the road is flat, of course, all of a sudden you're not pushing as hard as you were, you're just maintaining momentum. So the reason I always say to people, start, is because the hardest part is the beginning. My dad used to say to me, you will always be the worst at something the first time you do it. So the results you get the first time you do it are not the true results. That was the worst version of you doing that thing. That's the first time you sing, first time doing public speaking, first time you try to do a comedy set. First time you do anything is the worst time because you don't have the skill set. But as you do it, what happens is you mature, you get better, and you learn, right? So that's what I mean by that is the reason it's important to start is because all of those stories, that self-narrative that you've been saying and toiling in your head, the excuses are valid, the world isn't fair, but guess what? At the beginning, it is going to be tough. But the only way out of it is to start. There is no other way out of it. You can't negotiate with it, right? It's let me just one last thing for you to think about. So I said this to an entrepreneur literally today who came to see me about this very thing. And she was saying to me, look, business, it's COVID, it's been a tough time, yada, yada. And I said to her, if you went to, imagine, the Empire State Buildings. I said to her, if you went to the top of the building and stood at the ledge, prayed to whichever God you praise, God, Buddha, Allah, and told them that you don't believe in gravity and jumped, you'd find that gravity believes in you, right? So I was saying to her, the environment in the moment we're in is gravity. You can't negotiate your way out of it, right? What you can do is you can get started with who you need to be to survive this moment. And what she was doing, which is what I think a lot of people do, is they hang on to who they used to be, right? So I used to be well, that's not working anymore. So who do you need to be? And get started on that journey. I really, honestly, firmly believe in the school of starting. Starting, I think, is often more important in the entire momentum construct than everything that comes after that.
So the first thing I say to anyone who says, I want to become a speaker, is it's like wanting to become a singer. Sing, right? So the practice and the iteration is the single most important. When I started, I did a lot of work pro bono. So I'd get invited by Rotary clubs and I'd go and speak at places because I wanted to get into the application of the skill so I could get better at it, right? So there is a difference between being a paid speaker and a speaker. So the first thing I say to people is just speak. If you get invited to speak at your kids', graduation ceremony, go. If you get invited to speak at church, do it. If you get invited to MC a friend's wedding, do it. Start practicing this thing you want to do. Typically, when we're in business, there are some service lines or product lines which make more margin, more profit than others. So the natural proclivity for business leaders is to focus on the service lines that make more money and kind of abandons the ones that don't. And in the US, General Motors, Daimler, Chrysler, and a couple of other players who were making very big, what they call trucks in the US, these very big cars, Jeep, right? And they were making a lot of money on the big cars. And then on the small cars, they were making a little bit of money. So they thought, and then Toyota came into the US, and Toyota started selling cars in the US, and they were competing with these companies on the small cars. And all of them, General Motors, Jeep, Ford, were like, it's too little profit. So we leave it, and we let Toyota do it. It's the biggest mistake I watch entrepreneurs make, and business leaders make it too. It's called seeding market in areas that are non-core. And what you do is, if you seed market in areas that are non-core, you give your competitor time to breathe and room to grow. Because then what happens is Toyota now owns that area of the market without competition. Which means even if they make a tiny bit of margin, they don't have to worry about a competitive short-term dynamic. So immediately what happens is they start thinking differently. They start investing more money.
And then they build capital to take you on in another area.
And you know where they'll go? Because it's the innovator's dilemma. They don't make enough margin here. So where will they go? They go up. In other words, you left them in a small space to focus on the big space. What you didn't realize was you were giving them room to build up capital so they can fight you in the big space. So Toyota starts migrating up, right? So Toyota starts making bigger cars. They do it first with what was called a Sienna. Then they made the Camry, which we know in South Africa very well. They made the Cressida, which we know in South Africa very well. And all they were doing was they were migrating up to larger cars. Now, the problem with Toyota was they were making their cars in Japan, exporting them to America. And for the American person, or the average US person, it was still a Toyota. It represented reliability and quality, but it didn't quite represent opulence and luxury. And they were making really good cars. So one day, the story is told like fable, but they're sitting in a board meeting. And one day they're having a conversation about what are we going to do with this problem? And they thought the problem was about pricing. And out of nowhere, a little voice from the back said, this is not a pricing problem, it's a brand problem. We've built a brand that represents one thing. We have a market that associates our brand with one thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to sell them something different.
Yeah.
So we should just, rather than change the car, just change the logo on the car.
So that even if the car is amazing and brilliant and it fights the Mercedeses and the BMs,
100%.
the fact that it's still called a Toyota,
It's a
is
Toyota.
what's stopping us. So let's change it.
You know how you know when you're driving the wrong cars? If I ask you what car you drive and you tell me the derivative, not the brand. So if I said, what do you drive? You drive GT, you say I drive a GT86. You don't tell me I drive a Toyota Coupe.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because a person drives an Aston Martin
Yes.
doesn't go, I drive a DB9
Yeah,
or a
yeah,
Vanquish. He asks,
yeah,
what do I drive? I drive an Aston
I
Martin.
drive a Bentley.
Do you get it?
Not
I
like
drive a Bentley.
Yeah.
I don't need to
okay.
tell you if it's a Mulsanne or if it's Continental or it's a Bentley.
Okay, so you say a little voice in the boardroom spoke up.
So the voice says, change the logo.
Yeah.
And they go, what do we call it? Well, and they go through this process. And the answer was, what is it? It's a luxury product. What do? We export it. And to whom? To the US. So what is this thing? It's a luxury export to the US.
Lexus.
It's a Lexus. We'll just call it a Lexus. And they created the brand Lexus. And now today, Lexus is the third largest luxury brand in the US.
Thinking simply, using what you have, and keeping your eye on the prize.
I watch entrepreneurs make this mistake all the time. They don't win market share. They think the problem is the product. Sometimes the problem is what people think the product is. You just got to change the brand of the product. The thing's fine. It works. You get an HP and an Apple do exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But you pay a 40% premium on the other because you associate something with the brand.
What I've become very good at, I think, is understanding what you call the golden thread, which is the why for me. And my why always is that I told you this last time we spoke, is I'm an elevate guy. So I'm not the person you bring in when you want somebody to steady the ship. I'm the guy you bring in when the ship is a bit too steady and you want somebody to F things up and you want to elevate people's level of ambition, their drive, their goals. I do it in different ways, whether I'm on a platform speaking or I'm writing a book or I'm investing in an entrepreneur. Whatever I do, if the minute I get involved, the outcomes get elevated because that's what I bring, right? And so I think it's important for people to, rather than ask the question, should I focus on one thing or do many things? The question should be, what do I want to be in my eulogy? When I'm no longer here and somebody's standing in front of my peers and friends and haters, and they're telling the story of my life, what do I want them to say? Because usually what you'll notice is if you start with the end in mind, then your purpose becomes very clear. You know, you'll write down the stuff that matters to you just instinctively. I want people to say that I did X and I did Y and I did Z. Well, then do X and Y and Z. That's the stuff you should be focusing on.
My dad did a style of martial arts called Kyokushinkai. And I suppose as a little boy trying to get close to dad, I was like, well, if he's doing it, I'm going to join him. So my dad and I shared this incredible passion of martial arts and cars, right? So I kind of get started, with my father. Then he gets gunned down when I'm 13 years old. And I went through like a year of just nothing. I couldn't show up at the dojo. I didn't have it in me. And I did all the things we're talking about. The excuses. At the time, South Africa had a particularly high crime problem. And I was like, what's the point? Here's a first-degree black belt who gets attacked. He takes 9 bullets and he's dead anyway. Why am I going to this thing called the dojo, right? Again, excuse is valid. It really is. But there's no progress. So a year, nothing. And then I was like, I actually miss it. So I went back. It was interesting when I went back, it wasn't the same. I wasn't doing the kata to impress the senseis anymore. I was doing the kata because I wanted every single movement to be as close to flawless as I could get it. It changed my entire perspective. So, and one of the things that happened, you're going to love this. I'm literally getting chills thinking about it. One of the things that happened is time just expanded. So, because we have a very finite construct of time, I'm going to be at the dojo for an hour. But what happened was that hour felt like 5 hours, and sometimes 30 minutes felt like 5. All of a sudden, this fixed construct of time, it started to change because my relationship with what I was doing changed. So it wasn't just a punch. It wasn't just the kata. I wasn't just showing up for the emotion. I was embedded in every single part of the process. I was looking for growth, for progress, right? I have to tell you, that changed my entire life. So anytime I find myself stuck now,
I recognize that often the reason I'm stuck is because I'm focusing on the output and I'm not focusing on my input, right? So output, I've got to raise 100 million rand for my business. Output, I've got to get 300% growth for, in customers. Output, I've got to get 25. Yeah, that's all output. But what you got to focus on is input. What are the things I've got to do, and how do I do those things intentionally, deliberately, and try to get better every single time? Every meeting, every impact conversation with one of my staff members, every engagement with a client or a potential client, every single one of those things. How do I focus on that moment? Because actually the output is a sum total of how those things come about. So when you are at the dojo and you are being graded and you are going through the process of trying to attain your black belt or your brown belt, that's what everybody sees as the output. But what actually went in was that malleable construct of time where you were trying to perfect every single movement.
The hardest way to create wealth, it's also the most rewarding way to create wealth, but the hardest way to create wealth is to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because if you follow the flow of the income statement and you see who gets paid first, if you just go through the income, first the suppliers, then you pay your staff, then you pay the government taxes, then you pay the bank interest, then you pay yourself dividends. So the entrepreneur in the business gets paid last. But unless we go through an education system that teaches us these things, what happens is we breed entrepreneurs, you're seeing it now, who think entrepreneurship is instant money. Do you see?
Yeah.
Whereas any person who's a real entrepreneur, and I'm not, with respect, I'm not talking about people who pose as entrepreneurs, I'm talking real entrepreneurs, will tell you that it takes a long time and it's very hard. So that's why you need an education for people who want to be an entrepreneur. And it doesn't have to be commercial education. Like you can go study architecture, doesn't matter.
As long as you've studied the discipline of
the thing.
repetition.
Like study the thing, be in the thing. You know the mistake we often make, because particularly in South Africa, we love the idea of owning a business, right?
True.
We don't think about a business is an instrument for the work. It's not the purpose for existing. If you think about it. So if I want to do creative work, say, and I register a business, that there is a COVID doesn't mean I can't do the creative work. It just means I can't operate the business. If that makes any sense. So the answer for him might be to think about how does he offer his skills to people who still require his skills without necessarily getting them to sign a contract with his business. It's very big now, right? It's called this thing called the gig economy. So there might be something for him to try. We use it in our firm. There are several like this. There's a platform called TaskRabbit. We use Upwork. And all of those are global platforms where, say, I want a logo designed. I go on it and I say, I need somebody to design a logo.
Yeah.
And it will publish to 10,000 logo designers around the world that Vusi in Joburg needs a logo designed. He's willing to pay $25 an hour. Do you want to bid for the work? So that might be something for him to consider, rather than I've started a business, I can't do a website, I can't. He should take his skill and make this skill available on an ecosystem that already exists.
We live in a very mechanistic world where people are looking for the formula. That's why I said there's no template to life. People are looking for that formula that it can just apply. It's like Excel. You can, there's a formula, you plug in the inputs and out comes the output. So, and that's how people treat wealth. I think people treat wealth and meaning like that. People go, Vusi, you got wealth. What's the formula? There is none. There's a bit of experimentation. There's a plug and a play somewhere. There's something I'm copying from somebody else. I got a board member of mine who said, sometimes you have to case life. I said, what is case? He says, copy and steal everything, right? I was like, wow, it's really, really good, right? So, and there are parts where I'm experimenting new things and trying stuff for the first time, then it works. There are parts where we steal a little bit from somebody else and then that works. Then there are parts where you do both and it fails. But what you're constantly looking for is to fail upward. So that wherever we fail, we're failing at a level different to the level we're trying at. And that's just about move yourself upward to the next level.
99% of the people that want to be the leader and envy the benefits of leadership don't have the mettle of what it takes to lead. That's why leadership is so difficult and so complex. Because when things are easy and times are certain and the direction is clear, it's easy to lead. In fact, you don't even need to lead. Things just kind of take care of themselves. But leaders are leaders and can only emerge as leaders
when it's times of strife and difficulty and complexity, right? Maybe think about it this way. Why does the pilot get paid what he gets paid? My view is the pilot doesn't get paid to fly the plane. The pilot doesn't get paid to take off and to land. You know, they've got autopilot now, so the plane can do that itself. But why do you still need a pilot there? And why do pilots still talk about how many hours have you got on the job? Why is that still important? Because as passengers, we take comfort in knowing that if something goes wrong with this plane, if an engine blows up, or an engine seizes, or we hit a rough patch of turbulence, the person behind the wheel is going to know what to do. So if you think about that pilot, he's actually getting paid to manage difficulty and complexity. He's not getting paid to take off and land. Anyone can take off and land. It's like anyone can start a business and register and open a bank account and create a website, right? If you're a manager today in a large corporate, anyone can get a team and start giving out and dishing out instructions. But what really makes you a leader is how you step up when it's the time to step up. It's how your energy, your disposition, your approach changes and consistent with the time. Because the other thing leaders do is they act for their moment, right? In times of peace, the general who's the leader in the army acts for the time of peace. And so what he does is he maintains discipline. He ensures that his troops are well trained. He ensures that they've got the armor and that they continue to train and are battle ready all the time. But in times of war, the general gets paid what the general gets paid because somebody has to make the call. Someone has to choose tactics and strategy. Somebody has to say which target gets hit first. And somebody has to be willing to make the difficult decisions. That's why the general is the general. But if you think about it, almost all people that join the army want the rank of general. I'm not sure how many of them want the responsibility. Everybody wants the rank because it's the general. He gets the respect. He walks in, he's dripping swagoo. You know, his uniform is lined with colors. He's the Makulubas. But when the pawpaw hits the fan, that's when his job starts. And that's the thing about leadership. Leadership starts when it's a time to lead. And until you've had a moment to lead, you can't call yourself a leader, right? And that's why leadership is not positional. You can have the job and still not be the leader. You can have the position and still not be the leader, because leadership is about how we behave and our energy that we bring in and our intensity and our disposition when it's a moment to lead. And it's about knowing this is a moment to lead. It's not a moment to sit back and to wallow and to wait, right? I don't know about you, but for me, that's been very, it's been cathartic almost. The thinking about, why do I face difficulty, strife, and complexity? As an individual, as a father, as a husband, as a son, and as a businessman. Why do I go through difficulty and challenges? And then I realize, often it's because those difficulties and challenges are to build me up so that I'm ready for where I'm going. Which is the second thing I wanted to tell you about leadership, by the way, which is this. You could try as much as you want, but you can't be educated into leadership. Leadership is not about qualifications. It's not about education. Leadership is not even about tenure. You could work 20 years, do the same job, and still not know how to lead. Leadership is about growing into and being groomed into the place. So you grow into the place. But how you grow into the place is you have to go through stresses. If you think about the concept of stress, it's like taking a piece of elastic and pulling it. When you pull the piece of elastic, what you do is you stretch it beyond its natural sense of comfort. You stress it, right? Same too with how you build anything, is you have to pull it and stress it beyond its natural place of comfort. That's how it builds leaders, is you have to be stressed and pulled beyond your natural place of comfort so that you can prove that I can operate at level 1, then level 2, then level 3, then level 4, then level 5. I can operate at all these levels and lead because I've been through the challenges of operating at those levels and I've had the opportunity to lead.
Your reality is your reality. You're not imagining it. You're not imagining that you're poor. You're not imagining that you're left out because you live in a third world country. You're not imagining that you're not getting the right quality of education to make you globally competitive. You're not imagining that. It's real, right? Okay. But now that you've got it, you can live in the emotion. And sometimes I do. I get really, really mad and really, really upset. But then the following morning comes and you realize that you've moved not an inch of distance, yet you've expanded all of this time and this emotion. I mean, right now, if you think about the world we live in, just think about how much hatred there is. Think about how much anger there is. And yet we're not moving. So what really pulls me out of it, and it's an honest conversation with me, is I go, do you want the emotion or do you want progress? Because you can't have both.
Oh,
right.
Go deeper on that.
Right?
That's crazy.
So,
you just gave me the chills.
I'll give you an example. You're at the gym, right? You're curling. You're rep 8, and your body starts to fire off those signals in your brain, and it goes, stop. It hurts. If you stop, you get the emotion. You don't get the progress. So if you talk to any decent athlete, they'll tell you that where the pain starts is when the work starts, right? Talk to any decent entrepreneur that's built a large-scale business. They'll tell you that they had to go through. So you either get the emotion or you get the progress, but you can't have both, right? We're living in this world today where everybody is just so deeply embedded in the emotion. I want to be angry at Tom because he's X, Y, and Z, and I want to be angry at Vusi because, yet you make no progress.
I say this to every person I meet, which is public speaking is a skill, it's a tool. And it is, in my view, the single most important skill of any person who sees themselves as a leader in the new age. The ability to communicate, or the lack of it, often determines the extent to which you will succeed in life. So when you're going into an interview, it's about whether or not you can sell yourself.
Persuasion.
Exactly right.
That's
It's exactly
all it is.
right.
CEOs spend 90% of their time
Exactly.
persuading people to do things.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And so your ability to communicate, to speak in public, as a result of it, often will determine how society perceives you and how successful you'll become at whatever pursuit you do.
When we do, and I do a fair amount of sales training with my own team here, but I often talk about, we don't close here. So we don't close a sale, we open a relationship. So the way we lead the sales process is the whole time we're having a conversation with you to give you a sense of why you would benefit by having a relationship with us. This has nothing to do with whether or not you buy from us. This is just like, we want to have a relationship with you. And we have that relationship by offering these products, which we believe suit this need of yours. And by the way, it's connected to the things you find important. If these are the things you find important, because we do, then we should sustain this relationship for a period of time. And we do that by having you sign this contract. So we really, and I've taken a lot of time I've spent a lot of time with my sales team going, don't close a sale. People should never feel like you've closed anything. They should rather feel like they've become part of something, part of a family, part of a movement, part of something that matters, something that's going to make a difference, right? Especially today's world with millennials, who don't buy stuff based on value. They buy stuff based on values. So what you really want to make sure is that you open the sale. I think public speaking taught me that kind of instinctively, because in public speaking, what you're doing is you're communicating a very complex set of ideas as simply as possible. And you're doing it in the hope that that it's going to inspire action. So, when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to break bread on the table of brotherhood. The first thing he did is he used imagery, because the minute the mind can see it, then you're closer to doing it, right? But the second thing he does is says, I have a dream. Towards the end of the speech, if you listen to it, he says, we need a messaging to the United States that says that you guys have issued us this check for the promises you've made, but this check has returned saying no money in the bank account. So he says, even though I have this dream, if the system or the situation doesn't allow for this dream to be actualized, it's not going to be actualized. And that works. That's really, really an effective way of doing it. So I would say to anybody who's in a sales process, particularly people who are entrepreneurs, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're selling every day, is you don't close a sale, you open a relationship. And you open a relationship in the same way you would when you want to date someone, by going, I like you. I think we have a bit of chemistry. I think this thing could go somewhere. But I think, so what do you say about a date? Then at the end of the first date, you go, what do you say about a second one? Right? That's kind of, in our firm, that's kind of how we think about building relationships with clients. It's just, you see the world in this way. We see the world in this way. What do you say we go on a date? Let's try something together. And that opening of relationships is far more sustainable because, by the way, just one final thing.
every time you close a sale, notice what you have to do is you have to make a hard promise. You never close a sale without making a hard promise. So before you close a sale, you go through the promising stage where you go, I promise my product or my business is going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you open a relationship, you don't really make a promise. You make a commitment. You kind of go, I commit that I'm going to be available, that I'm going to do the best I can, that I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that we succeed. But a commitment is different because a promise is final. A commitment allows for latitude. So in a commitment where you fail, you can be honest and go, I thought it would, but it didn't work, or there's a problem here, or it's a mechanical issue. And because you've opened a relationship, people are a lot more forgiving than if you made very hard promises trying to close a sale, and now this thing doesn't do what you said it would do 6 months in.
Your thing about brand, and I say this to my team all the time, which is, even in the construct of brands, we must always recognize that we will never be the equal of the brand. And this is what many people who build brands get wrong. So particularly people who do personal branding. So they go, well, I'm a great X, I'm a great comedian, a great singer, a great actress, a great whatever. So you become this brand thing, but you forget that a brand is something that lives in people's mind, which is to say your existence becomes a manifestation of somebody else's expectation. Now, most people are bad at the expectation part. So they think you're still in charge. You're not in charge anymore. This thing called a brand now outlives you. It's a bit like building a Lego set. You just built the pieces. What people will do with this Lego set is up to you. And that's kind of how I think about my life.
That is such a hard truth.
It is, right?
It is such a hard truth.
And by the way, the most powerful brands are the ones that the people who construct don't own. When you cease ownership, that's when you've built a brand.
Tasha's.
Exactly, because it means that there's somebody on the other end who's gone, this thing is so powerful, not only do I want to be a part of it, I want to help build it. And that's hard. I imagine you're a lot like me. Like what are we doing now? So,
and also you still want, because it's Anele, you still want Anele to be making the decisions, right? So yes. So basically you are teaching us that when you know that you can comfortably start releasing the power.
Let go.
That's when you know that you've been successful.
True. There is I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche that said that true power finds expression in the absence of power. Which is to say, when I can give power away and still have power, I have power.
So I live by 2 core principles, right? The first is that everything everyone knows, they learned. And I don't accept that I'm less intelligent than the next person, which means I can learn it too, right? The second is that every single excuse I have is valid, but that's still not going to give me the results that I want. And so we do live in this really PC culture today, where people are looking for the excuse. And the truth is, the excuse is completely valid. Yes, you are a young black person growing up in democratic South Africa for the past 26 years, but for hundreds of years before that, it wasn't built for you to succeed, right? Yes, you're living in one of the most difficult credit capital markets in the world, so it's hard to get access to funding to start a business. Yeah, all of that stuff's true, but that's still not going to change your circumstance. So the test is not whether or not you know the reasons for not succeeding. The test is whether or not you're willing to do whatever it takes to get to that next level. And a big part of the whatever it takes actually is just remain teachable. Just be a student of the game, a student of life, a student of those who've achieved. And I've found that those 2 things have really stood me in good stead.
So I did martial arts, I did music, I played the violin, etc. But everything else I did is as a result of the martial arts.
Of course he plays the violin. Of course he plays the violin.
Because, I mean, you know, the idea that you've got to do your kata over and over and over and over and over, same movement, same rotation. Even today as an entrepreneur, when you build a business, you've got to do the simple things over and over and over. And it is in the application it is in the iteration and application that excellence is achieved. And I think that's what people don't understand. So people go, so how do you get to number 1 of the thing? You actually just have to do the simple things, but do them every day religiously and each time with a consistent discipline. That's the mark. That's how you get there.
I think the mistake many of us make when we're trying to close a sale is we act like salespeople, right? So you know, there's something counterintuitive about sales training, which is you learn everything you learn in sales so that you can do it instinctively and intuitively rather than do it off a script. So if you come across to a client as if you're doing something for a script, they immediately feel as if they're being sold to. And just like you do when you're watching a TV ad, you get up and go make popcorn. because nobody wants to be sold to. As human beings, we've built up such a high emotional resistance to being sold stuff because we're being sold every day. You're on your IG and there's pop-up sponsored ads. You're on Facebook and there's sponsored ads. You're driving on the highway and there's a billboard. You just, if you get to your emails and you're filled up with spam, somebody's always trying to sell you something. So as human beings, we've built up such an emotional resistance and a cognitive resistance to selling that the best way to sell is not to. The best way to sell is to understand the mechanics of selling, understand how it actually works, but then do it in a way that is just instinctive and intuitive for you. And the only way to do that is through practice.
I have come to realize that there are no perfect decisions, but decisions that I make perfect.
Yeah.
That is something else that I loved reading in your book.
Yeah.
Walk me through that garden.
Again, right? So remember, you're in this journey. You're doing this thing called life. You're building this thing called a business. You're in pursuit of this end goal called profit, and somewhere in between it, the pursuit of purpose. You're trying to create a better workplace for your people, a place where they can come and belong. You want to serve communities. You want to better the lives of customers. There are 1,000 things you want to do. And so we go to business schools, and business schools, particularly the ones I went to, teach you about, they give you case studies and they go, this business leader did X and that business leader did X. And there's like this literature that says they make perfect decisions. Then when I spend time with business leaders, I realize they don't. Most of them just make a decision.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable in the knowledge that decisions are meta by their nature, which is to say, I'm going to get on the freeway and just go from one place, I'm going to another.
Yeah.
In my head, I kind of have a path of how I'm going to get there. But if on the way there's traffic, I'm going to change the route. If I hit a pothole, I'll stop and fix.
But I'm going there.
But I'm going to get there.
So fig.
And this is the thing about the perfect decision rather than the decision made perfect. The decision made perfect builds into it the assumption and the knowledge that I'm going to get things wrong. And I'm comfortable with getting things wrong. Because it's when you think you have to make perfect decisions that you get into the most dangerous thing leaders do. Ego, bravado, knowledge, arrogance, this walk in and like, I own it. No, you don't.
So we've always done it this way.
No.
Yeah.
Like, you're a part of a process. You're a servant. Sit down.
The hardest thing to do is to enable people to see themselves as they are. Not as they hoped they were, not as they've been taught they are, but as they actually are. It's the single hardest thing to do, and I'll tell you why. Because we're all embedded in this construct of a thing called identity, right? And what people forget is identity by its very nature, one is man-made, and two is exclusive. What that means is, the minute I say I'm male, it means I'm not female. If I say I'm black, it means I'm not white. If I say I'm African, it means I'm not American. If I say I am, educated, it means I'm not illiterate. So all the little words we use to construct identity put us in a box. They don't free us, right? And it's something people, I think, don't think about because people today have assumed an identity for who they are. And it's all over, right? It's in the media, it's on social media, it's on TV, it's in the newspapers, it's in music videos. All you're being sold is an identity. This is what you should be based on where you come from and based on how you've been socialized. Very early on, my father taught me that I didn't have to be what society told me, right? That I could be different if I wanted.
I want to put that in context and see if I'm understanding what you're saying. So I read Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. With me, dude, that book is so good. Like when every second I think I'm a badass, and then I remember that the man faced 27 years in prison and refused to compromise his principles. I'm just not that hardcore. And so that is phenomenal. And I remember him saying in the book, he was like, this is Nelson Mandela talking. He said, I got on an airplane and the pilot was black. And for a minute I was scared because I didn't think black people could fly a plane. And he was like, what the, like, how do I think that? And he said, if that had seeped into my mind, identity, right, then how many other people had accepted something less than who they were because of what society had told them? Is that what you mean? That we're sort of subtly taking on these I can'ts?
Exactly. So here's a great example. I'm short, therefore I can't model. Okay? I mean, it's not established that short people should model, but whether you should or whether you can are very different tests, right? And by the way, I approach every little thing in my life like that. Like all the shit I do, I go, I shouldn't, but it doesn't mean I can't. There's a big difference. So if you're telling me I shouldn't be in the room, you may be correct. It doesn't mean I don't have the capacity to be in the room. I want to force my way in. and I'm going to get to change your mind. So this thing about identity, I think, is so powerful, because in today's world where we're no longer demographics, we're a psychographic now. There's a kid living in Kuala Lumpur who's never been out of Kuala Lumpur, who sounds like a kid in Brooklyn, New York, because he's watching Jay-Z on YouTube. But he's completely immersed in that culture, and he's never left his small little village, right? And that's exactly the point, is everything you've been taught you are, somebody taught you that's what you are. Now, you can keep that identity, but again, you can't get the progress. And so what a lot of people do is they hang on to it, right? In South Africa, it's often about gender. Sometimes it's about tribe, right? So what tribe you come from. There's a big generation issue. So it's, I'm part of this generation. Yeah, all those things are true. But do you want the identity or do you want the progress? Because you can't have both. I'll tell you just quickly a story. So my dad was the sensei in the dojo, right? And I used to train with my dad in the dojo. And so I asked him one time, I was like, how come we get to change belts? Like, I mean, couldn't you teach the methodology without the belt system? He said two things. He said, first, human beings are incentive-based, so you need something to aim for. But he said the second thing is the reason we give you a belt is because it assigns an identity. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're orange belt, you can't take on a brown belt. It's just you embed that in your mind and you go, well, he's senior, then therefore. And so one of the things he said to me, one of the things you're going to have to learn is that real life doesn't have a belt system. So everything we know and have learned about identity is given to us. It's a template that somebody has given you, and you can just choose to run that script of Macross or not.
If you want another awesome video in our Black Excellence series, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.